All right, welcome to the 22nd installment to Biohack the World. We just had an incredible show. I so hope you guys are going to join us. Did you know that your eyes are the windows to our soul, and now through innovation in science and technology, windows to possibly our internal health? These same cameras are connected to our brain through our optic nerve, cranial nerve number 2. Direct innervation to our most important organ, in my opinion, and ours, our command center, our brain. So please understand that our eyes are part of our brain, and more than 50% of the cortex, the surface of our brain, is devoted to processing our visual information. Our vision serves as the main source of information for us from the moment we are injected into this world, this dimension, evolving our brains through our lives, progressing, but then eventually regressing, but maybe with a different approach and a holistic solution, including preventative techniques. This regression or decay can be reduced or reversed. Understanding how vision works may be a key to understanding how the brain works altogether. Our physical balance relies on several body parts working together. Our eyes, our ears, our bones, our joints, our brain, they all must work in synergy. Each one is constantly updating each other and adjusting to keep the body from falling down on the ground. Balance disorders typically include poor vision as a symptom, whether blurred or uneven. Good vision makes these symptoms easier to handle, especially when the vision itself is being treated. Navigating and interacting with the world around us relies on balance, what we call homeostasis. Balance in our physical body, our proprioception, our vestibular system. Balance of our emotions and our reactions to the world around us, our fellow humans, and all the colors we are made of, other species of life, Mother Nature that surrounds us. All of which rely heavily on our cameras, our eyes, the telescopes to our soul, our subconscious, our conscious. Could we say that the same about our emotional balance and our reactions to what we just visualized? Our perceptions of reality. Is the glass really half full or half empty? According to a recent research project done by experts in human development, what we see in the pupils, the overall shape of our eyes, and the movements of our eyebrows are all communications of our emotions. These expressions in and around our eyes influence how we see, how we show what we are thinking, how we feel, what's in our soul at that moment. A quote from the Bible: "The eye is the lamp of the body. If eyes are healthy, your whole body will be full of light." That quote reminded me of our functional medicine philosophy in healthcare. It's here where we study the patient's symptoms, taking a biology-based approach that focuses on identifying and addressing the root cause of our modern diseases, but more importantly, understanding that prevention is far better than a cure, and always considering mind, body, and spirit, and our consciousness. Understanding that we have an innate intelligence to heal, understanding that each symptom may be one of many contributing to an individual's illness, either mental, physical, or emotional, or all the above. All that from our eyes and our brains that play what a vital role in our overall health. Really looking forward to you guys following this episode. Welcome, virtual biohackers, to our 22nd installment of Biohack the World, as we dive into all things ocular health with our two leading eye physicians this evening, Dr. Kerry Gelb and Kaushal Kulkarni. Following our show this evening will be a screening of Dr. Gelb's impressive feature-length documentary, Open Your Eyes, as he and his team of filmmakers traverse the globe to explore how America got so sick and how optometrists can now see almost 300 systemic diseases in the eye. Behind the scenes this evening, making this all come together, is the one and only Avisha Nesavir, Chief Science Officer, David Choi, Executive Producer and founder of Biohack the World. Thank you, David, for making this all happen for all of us. Really appreciate you. and Stefan Brzezinski of Birch Media, who's getting all of our AV needs set up for you folks at home. And we have a kind of live studio audience and a real live studio audience in the background, the one and only Sage Raider, breathwork extraordinaire, coming to visit us. So thank you very much for coming this evening, everybody. Our next order of business is to show the Open Eyes trailer, and then from there we're going to be going into trivia. So without further ado, David, trailer please.
Each generation was supposed to be healthier than the last one. Lifespan was supposed to be increasing. We were supposed to be in this paradise by now. Instead of getting healthier and healthier, it seems to have gone the opposite way.
Millennials were projected to be the first generation in history to not outlive the generation before them.
We are certainly headed for disaster.
I think a lot of people are beginning to question the whole story.
We live in a time where the paradigms are shifting.
And the optometrist, in my opinion, is one of the best kept secrets.
The public doesn't realize about going to the eye doctor. So many different diseases actually manifest in the eye. The back of the eye is the only place in the body that you could actually see the blood vessels.
Completely non-invasively, you could screen thousands of people, not just for their eye health, but for their whole body health.
Because this disease is here, it's also going to be here.
And I can look into the back of my eyeball, and there are expert doctors on the ground who are looking at my eyeball while I'm doing it.
The eye is the canary of the mind.
The eye is the kingdom.
Will everyone please open their eyes?
Love that trailer. The eye is the canary of the mind. So just to let you know, on biohackthe.world, password biohack, you can watch Open Eyes starting this evening after the show. Open your eyes until Sunday evening. Definitely recommend it. And one of my favorite parts of Biohack the World show is trivia time. So without further ado, Avisha.
Thank you, Rudy. Trivia time is great because we get to hear a little bit from the audience and see how much random information do they know. So, trying to keep it a bit on topic, right now we're going to ask you all, when was the first discovery of the lens? When were the principles of the lens first laid down? Was it A, in ancient Greece in the 5th century BC, B, in Egypt in the 11th century, C, in Italy in the 13th century, or D, in the Netherlands in the 16th century? Send your answers, A, B, C, or D, in the Zoom chat. Make sure to direct it to all panelists, and the first one to get the right answer will get a wonderful free copy of Ben Greenfield's Boundless, as well as, from our own Physiologic,
a functional medicine evaluation, 1 hour virtual with the one and only Dr. Patty de Blasio.
That is not something to pass up. All right, get your answers in, and we'll check back towards the end of the show with whoever got it correct.
Sage, you're not allowed to put an answer in.
All right, it gives me great pleasure now to introduce our next presenter, Dr. Kerry Gelb. Nope. Dr. Kulkarni. Ah, well. Instead, I shall introduce Dr. Kulkarni. Okay. My apologies, folks. We will be hearing from Dr. Gelb later, though. It is going to be great. Okay. Dr. Kaushal Kulkarni. Dr. Kulkarni is a board-certified neuro-ophthalmologist who graduated magna cum laude from Columbia University with a bachelor's degree in mechanical engineering. He attended the Robert Wood Johnson Medical School at Rutgers University in New Jersey, where he was inducted into the Alpha Omega Alpha Honor Society. That's a lot of alphas. He then completed a residency in ophthalmology at Georgetown University Washington Hospital Center in Washington, D.C., followed by a fellowship in neuro-ophthalmology at the the Bascom Palmer Eye Institute in Miami, Florida, which is consistently ranked the #1 eye institute in the nation by U.S. News and World Report. He worked in private practice at a top medical group in San Diego, California for over 6 years, where he was featured on local television on episode number 14 of The Sharp Experience. He is currently in practice in the New York City area. All right, we have a wonderful presentation coming up, and I look forward to seeing what he's got to say. So,
thanks, Dr. K. Welcome.
Thanks, Avisha. I know it's a mouthful, all those schools and and degrees. So I'm actually so glad to talk to you guys a little bit about eye health tonight. I was really glad when David reached out, because I think even for us as biohackers who take very good care of all aspects of our health, as you'll see tonight, I think our vision and our eye health is just something we tend to ignore until it's too late, and then we show up at the eye doctor and we freak out when something's going wrong. But for some reason, I think we tend to take our vision for granted. So I wanted to talk a little bit tonight about one of the topics that's really top of mind for most people today, and that's the topic of blue light and eye health. So am I able to share my screen here? Yeah, so. All right. So digital screens and eye health, it's really like one of the major questions I get nowadays. And so what is blue light, and what about these blue blocking glasses? And basically what else should I be doing? What do I need to know about? And so we'll answer a few of those questions tonight. When you talk about blue light, it's a big topic nowadays, but you have to go back to the entire electromagnetic spectrum. So light rays exist on a spectrum from gamma rays, which are very high energy, short wavelength, all the way up to microwaves and radio waves, which are shorter energy, lower energy and shorter wavelength. And if you take a very tiny sliver of that, it's called the visible light spectrum. And that little sliver is actually composed of white light. But remember that, I always think of that album by Pink Floyd. It's like, I think Dark Side of the Moon. It always reminds me of that when I see this photo, because white light is actually deceptive. It actually contains many different colors of light. And you might remember that acronym from high school or elementary school, Roy G. Biv, which describes the different colors that are in a rainbow, or when white light is reflected through a prism. So this is important because blue light is a very important color on that spectrum. It actually sits right next to UV light on the broader spectrum. And we all know UV light is dangerous to our health, our eyes, and our skin, but not many people think of blue light as being potentially toxic. But because it's high energy, a lot of these digital screens and LED sources use them as a source of light. They use blue light because of that high energy property. And as you'll see, that has potential consequences in our lives. Why? Because we're in this digital world where all of us are spending 8 to 10 hours a day on digital screens, just like the one you're watching me on now. And that can cause eye strain, poor sleep, and even potential photooxidative damage to the retina. And interestingly, to understand why blue light is so unique, we have to actually go back to the early days of evolution. So blue light is actually the wavelength of light that penetrates the ocean. Why is the ocean blue? Because blue light penetrates the ocean. All the other colors of light actually get reflected off the surface of the ocean. And if you believe or understand that we evolved originally from different species or microorganisms down on the bottom of the ocean or within the ocean, then you can see why we're so primed for blue light, because blue light is the only thing that would tell us what time of day it was. And our entire circadian rhythm is incredibly sensitive to blue light. So that's why you'll see in modern day, when we're exposed to blue light, it affects our melatonin levels and our sleep. And the reason is, we used to think that there were only 2 types of light sensing cells in the retina, rods and cones, and you guys have all heard of those. But it turns out there's a third type of cell in the retina, whose only job is to sense light. It's called an intrinsically photosensitive retinal ganglion cell. And those cells are found in the retina in a region called the macula, which is the center of our vision. And evolutionarily, those cells are primed to detect blue light. They're very sensitive to them. So this blue light that's all around us can really disrupt our sleep and circadian rhythm. Now, what should we do about it? A lot of us as biohackers especially, we like these blue blocking glasses and these light filtering apps, and blue blocking glasses have become so mainstream and cool nowadays that even Bono is wearing them. But the truth is that they have limited efficacy and the data is just not there yet. And that's probably for many reasons. Number one, it's probably just too early. But number two, the manufacturing is not standardized. So the studies show that blue blocking glasses are really just, in a sense, a Band-Aid that you put over the eye. They don't actually activate your eye's natural blue blocking function, which we'll talk about. And these light filtering apps are great too. Like I live by them, Flux and Night Shift and all of these apps. But it's not clear that they really filter out the blue light. And I always say that you can't fix a hardware problem, which is the blue light in the LEDs in the screen, with a software problem, which just changes the color of that screen. It seems that the blue light still bleeds around the edges of the screen and can still expose you. So what is the best solution? And this is something I've been researching and spent thousands of hours looking into. And like all things in life and like many things in biohacking, the solution really lies in nature. Not many people know that nature created two ingredients called lutein and zeaxanthin. And these are nature's natural blue light filters. And as you'll see, the composition of them and the properties of them make them really effective blue light filtering agents. Not only that, but because of their composition, they're actually native to the retina in this region called the macula, which you may have heard of. When that degenerates, it's called macular degeneration. Here's the structure of lutein, zeaxanthin, and this new third sister compound, which was recently discovered and is also very important, called meso-zeaxanthin. All I want you to see here is that there are these carbon-carbon double bonds. And because of those double bonds, lutein and zeaxanthin are able to absorb blue light at a peak area right in that blue light spectrum. So how do we get lutein and zeaxanthin? Well, the good news is they're found in green leafy vegetables. You may have heard that carrots are good for your eyes. That's because they contain a high amount of zeaxanthin, and things like egg yolks. The bad news is, even if you have an amazing diet and you're eating pounds and pounds of these vegetables every day, you're still probably not going to get enough to protect your eyes in this modern digital world. So the studies on lutein and zeaxanthin have really been done on dosages of about 10 to 20 milligrams of lutein and 2 to 4 milligrams of zeaxanthin. Even in the best diet, if you eat about 50 carrots a day, you're still going to have a hard time getting close to that amount. So as a medical doctor, it's rare that I recommend supplements broadly, but I think when it comes to eye health, supplements are one area where it makes sense. Because in the supplement world, we have some of the best evidence for it. And when I looked and searched and did tons of research on the best sources of lutein and zeaxanthin in the world, I found this special yellow flower called the marigold flower. Now, interestingly, the word lutein comes from the Greek word luteus, which means yellow. So it makes sense that this yellow flower is a very high potency and rich source of lutein. But it's very difficult to harvest that and bring that into production. And it turns out there's a company called OmniActive that I came across that has a product called Lutamax 2020. This is an amazing ingredient because it contains a very pure and rich source of high quality lutein and zeaxanthin, but also this third newly found compound called meso-zeaxanthin. And all of these ingredients have been shown in study after study to protect the eye and filter blue light, and have even been shown in many studies conducted all over the world and at the NIH to protect your eyes from macular degeneration and improve sleep and overall eye health. So when it comes to supplements in ophthalmology, we have some of the best evidence that's out there. It's really rare for a supplement to be tested by the NIH and by a randomized trial. And it's rare to have a supplement that's of high quality like Lutamax 2020. So in summary, blue light is all around us, it's everywhere, and it's impossible to avoid it. And because of evolution, it affects our sleep and circadian rhythm and can have potential damage to our eyes. But luckily, what most people don't know is there are two natural blue light filtering compounds produced by nature called lutein and zeaxanthin, and these can be very beneficial for your eye health. Thank you, and happy to take any questions.
All right, thank you so much for that amazing presentation, and I look forward to asking you a bunch of questions on it pretty soon. But first, we're going to go and hear from our other speaker for the evening, Dr. Kerry Gelb. Dr. Gelb spent the last 3 years traveling the continent and Europe producing a feature-length documentary entitled Open Your Eyes. It was released in 2020. Upon its release, he launched the Open Your Eyes podcast that delivers weekly episodes focusing on all aspects of health, and we will be showing that film later today. He has also been interviewed for radio and television on topics related to ocular health. He frequently lectures on the diagnoses and treatment of macular degeneration, glaucoma, and diabetes. He has extensive knowledge and expertise on the evaluation and fitting in specialty or hard-to-fit contact lenses. Man, I really should probably get a pair of those for myself. He's also certified in the evaluation and management of corneal refractive therapy contact lenses. He is committed to providing the highest quality of care to his patients. All right, so now we're going to hear a presentation from Dr. Gelb. Tell us a little bit about this film that you're going to be doing and what you've experienced.
Okay, well, thank you. I certainly appreciate it. I want to thank David and Rudy and for inviting me today and sharing the virtual stage with the esteemed neuro-ophthalmologist, Dr. K. I certainly appreciate that.
We appreciate you. Thank you for joining us.
So here's the outline of what we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about new technology in the eye. The eye is a biomarker. There are close to 300 systemic disease states that can manifest in the eye. It's because the eye is so complex and made from many different embryologic tissues. But I'm going to focus on diabetes, Alzheimer's, cataracts, and macular degeneration. And I'm going to leave you and your audience with a 10-point plan to prevent the leading cause of blindness, macular degeneration. The eye is the ultimate diagnostic biohack. It's the secret biomarker hiding in plain sight. Primary eye care doctors are the ideal medical providers to screen for early diabetes. Eye doctors see 2.5 times more patients compared to primary care or family care providers where they might have their blood drawn. The evolution of technology allows the eye to become a very early biomarker for systemic changes related to diabetes and other systemic diseases. Up in the left-hand corner is Charlie Babbage. He invented the ophthalmoscope back in 1847. The present-day ophthalmoscope that most physicians use could see about 100 microns of resolution. But as technology has improved, we have these retinal cameras that could see in the back of the eye and take pictures at 10 to 15 microns, allowing us to see the microcirculation in the body. Disease happens in the microcirculation very often before the macrocirculation in the body. This is what the instrument looks like. The new instrument that's coming out soon will be handheld and portable. The way the instrument works, it takes different LEDs of different nanometer wavelengths and slices and dices the retina into 12 different layers. Different layers of the retina correspond to different diseases, either systemic or ocular. I'm particularly interested in the 580 yellow wavelength because it highlights the oxygenated hemoglobin, making the retinal vascular highly visible, allowing me to see the smallest capillaries in the body and these tiny microaneurysms. Here's a picture of the back of the eye. Down here on the bottom, at the end of this blood vessel, you can see this little bulb. That's a microaneurysm. I was the first eye physician to discover microaneurysms through multispectral imaging. Through many tests, we found that microaneurysms in the eye are correlated with insulin resistance, either pre-diabetes or diabetes. I published my findings in the Journal of Diabetes, where we correlated microaneurysms with fasting insulin and 2-hour insulin. This is a picture when I see somebody that has microaneurysms or little hemorrhages. This is the blood test that I do. So if somebody wants to take a picture of it. Our goal as physicians is we want to find patients when their glucose tolerance is impaired or they have hyperinsulinemia way before they become diabetic and they get the sequelae of diabetes. Prevention is better than cure. Now here's the diabetes retinal spectrum. Up at the top, you can see the microaneurysm I spoke about, and in the second picture is a little retinal hemorrhage. Those pictures we cannot see with our ophthalmoscope. We need the new technology of multispectral imaging, or a technology that we can see between 10 and 15 microns. Soon we'll have technology to allow us to see 1 micron. On the bottom of the spectrum, now we can see with our ophthalmoscope and standard fundus cameras. The last picture here is when the patient starts getting these new blood vessels in the eye. We call it NVD or NVE. When that happens, the average lifespan of that patient is 3.5 years, dying from cardiovascular disease. Hyperinsulinemia could affect every part of the body from head to toe, just like elevated glucose. This is another technique that we use in our office, OCT angiography. What it does, it takes picture of the little capillaries in the eye. They're indicative of the little capillaries in the rest of the body. When we see these capillaries, but up and to the left, we see this dark spot. This dark spot means that the capillaries are dropping out. They're starting to get ischemic. We're losing them. We're losing them from either pre-diabetes or diabetes. If we could pick them up early, we could intervene with functional medicine techniques. Down at the bottom, this is somebody who has macular degeneration. They have dry macular degeneration that's becoming wet, and it's able to pick up these little flowers of abnormal blood vessels. OCT angiography also allows us to see the microaneurysms. Postprandial insulin assay, which is what we used in our study that correlated with the microaneurysms, are the earliest biomarker for diagnosing prediabetes, type 2 diabetes, and increased cardiovascular risk. Driven by added sugar, which drive coronary heart disease, insulin resistance, and hyperinsulinemia. So in conclusion of this section, primary eye care is the ideal channel for screening for microaneurysms. Early detection is the key to prevention. There are 300 systemic diseases that can manifest in the eye. These are different categories: vascular, autoimmune, neoplastic, infectious, even side effects to medication. Many times with these systemic diseases, they present in the eye first before in the rest of the body. Some examples: diabetes, hypertension, thyroid eye disease, zoster and simplex, Lyme disease, and certain cancers. Now, who should have lab tests when they go see the eye doctor? I'm going to highlight just one of the long list. This is a cataract, a clouding of the lens inside the eye. So young patients that have cataracts are at risk for diabetes. There are 5 studies that show they have greater risk for cancer. And there's a type of cataract that shows that they're at greater risk for getting Alzheimer's disease. Also, side effects from medication. OCT angiography also allows us to look at the back of the eye to see if you're at risk for Alzheimer's disease. The future goal is to use OCT angiography to detect Alzheimer's disease early, so we could refer to people like Dale Bredesen, who could use techniques to prevent the progression of Alzheimer's. What OCT angiography does, it takes a picture of the blood vessels in the eye, and you can see these little tiny capillaries, the blue hair compared to the blue hair is starting to drop out, which mirrors the blood vessels in the brain. Also in the eye, there's the middle layer between the retina and the white part of your eye, the sclera, is the choroid. That's the most highly vascularized tissue in the body. Those blood vessels start to drop out, and that's a sign of Alzheimer's with OCT. This is another OCT picture, and what we're seeing is the little nerve fiber layer, the little nerves making up the big nerve are starting to drop out, called the retinal nerve fiber layer. Let's turn our attention to macular degeneration, the leading cause of blindness in the US. There are about 4 million people that are blind in this country from macular degeneration. So what has changed? What causes macular degeneration? Well, ophthalmologist and researcher, Dr. Chris Kenobi, modern day Weston Price, has looked at this extensively. And he found out before 1900, there was basically nobody in the US with macular degeneration, cancer, cardiovascular disease. But what's changed since then? Well, what's changed is man-made processed food, and approximately 63% of the American diet consists of 4 refined, nutrient-deficient processed foods, the worst of which is polyunsaturated fatty acids, refined flour, trans fats, and sugar is what Dr. Kenobi has felt is the cause of macular degeneration. But macular degeneration should simply not be considered an eye disease, but rather a systemic vascular disease. And it's more common in people who have inflammatory disease, such as metabolic syndrome. Here's a picture of macular degeneration where the back of the eye starts to degenerate, and we start to get these bubbles. These bubbles are filled with lipids, inflammatory cells, and breakdown of the tissue. Just the presence of one of these large drusen, that's what they're called, drusen, doubles the cardiovascular risk of that patient. So how do we prevent macular degeneration? Well, we look at the dynamic trio, lutein, zeaxanthin, and meso-zeaxanthin, that make up the macular pigment in the back of the eye. The more macular pigment, the less risk you have for macular degeneration. Macular pigment also filters out the blue light. So if you have low amount of macular pigment, you'll be much more sensitive to light. We call that photophobia. You'll have more trouble with glare. You'll have trouble going from a dark room to a light room, like a movie theater. And here's an instrument that measures macular pigment. Macular pigment is often considered as internal sunglasses, because it also blocks, when the blue light comes in, it prevents free radicals. So how do we build macular pigment? We build macular pigment from carotenoids. Carotenoids are pigments that are in plants, and they protect the plants from photodamage. So there are 800 carotenoids in nature, but there are only 3 in the eye: lutein, meso-zeaxanthin, and zeaxanthin. So where are these carotenoids located? Well, your body can't make them. You have to get lutein from green leafy vegetables such as kale, spinach, collard greens, zeaxanthin from orange peppers, goji berries, meso-zeaxanthin in the flesh of trout or shellfish, but it's not very abundant in our diet. So we need the body to convert lutein to meso-zeaxanthin. That's why it's good to take a supplement, as Dr. K said, that has meso-zeaxanthin in it. So where do we find these lutein and zeaxanthin? Where do we find them in these vegetables? And you can see in this picture here. But here, look at goji berries, how much zeaxanthin is in goji berries. I consider goji berries a superfood. It has 18 amino acids, 21 trace minerals, and has more vitamin C than an orange. So healthy benefits of macular pigment. We want to build up our pigment because it helps us going from a dark room to a light room, like a movie theater. So if we have trouble adapting, it might be because we have low macular pigment or we're starting to get macular degeneration. And it helps with light sensitivity, glare, helps us seeing at dusk. It helps with contrast, so it helps us easier to read. I'm really interested in that it helps our temporal processing speed for people that play sports such as baseball or tennis. And it also helps with computer fatigue, just like Dr. K mentioned before. I want to take your attention to my last topic, which is cataracts. Again, which is the lens inside the eye becoming cloudy. How do we prevent cataracts? Well, we prevent cataracts by keeping our blood sugar normal, not smoking, and not drinking too much, and eating foods with dark green leafy vegetables such as lutein, zeaxanthin, and vitamin C. There was a very interesting study where they looked at twins, and they looked at them after 10 years. And the twin that had consumed the most vitamin C had a 33% decreased risk of cataracts. And in another study, patients who consumed 10 milligrams of lutein and zeaxanthin decreased their risk of cataracts by about 26%. I want to leave you with my 10-point plan to prevent macular degeneration. Number 1 is things we want to avoid, such as smoking, weight gain, the big belly. Metabolic syndrome increases the risk of macular degeneration by 2 to 3 times. We want to avoid artificial sweeteners. The one that I do like is D-ribose. It's part of Sinatra's awesome foursome. It's actually used in Europe for congestive heart failure. But side effects of D-ribose is tachycardia, so you got to be careful you don't take too much of it, and it can affect your sleep because it helps make ATP, so it gives you energy. We want to eat foods with omega-3s in it. High amounts of omega-3s decrease the risk of AMD by about 40%. We recommend an anti-inflammatory paleo-type diet, foods that contain lutein and zeaxanthin, spices to decrease inflammation. AMD is an inflammatory disease, so we want to decrease inflammation. We want the vitamin D level to be optimal in your body, between 50 and 80 nanograms per ml. If we could get it there, we could decrease the risk of AMD by about 40%. Regular stress reduction and exercise. Exercise about 35% reduction. B complex. We want you to take a B complex if you have high homocysteine. Digestive enzymes. It's often said it's not what you eat, but it's what you digest. There's very interesting studies on lutein and zeaxanthin in the serum. When lutein and zeaxanthin is high in the serum, with zeaxanthin, you decrease the risk of AMD by 90%. Lutein decreases it by 70%, and with cataracts, zeaxanthin decreases it by about 70%. But if you just eat the foods, it decreases by 40% because it's not what you eat, it's what you absorb. These are the tear-off sheets I give to my patients on preventing macular degeneration, my 10-point plan. This is diabetes. These are the tests that I talked about, multispectral imaging, OCT angiography, and measuring macular pigment. And I just want to leave you with this real quick case. This is a patient of mine who had microaneurysms and drusen. We put him on my 10-point plan, and after 3 weeks, he looked like that. So thank you for listening. Please tune into my podcast. Half the podcasts are eyes, where we interview eye doctors, optometrists, ophthalmologists, vision scientists, and the other half is functional medicine doctors, such as people like Robert Lustig and Ted Naiman. And I'll be happy to answer any questions. Thank you very much.
Awesome. Thank you, docs. Thank you, audience, for joining us. And just once again, you can find that feature documentary, Open Your Eyes, on biohackthe.world. Biohackthe.world. It'll be playing through Sunday evening with password Biohack. Hey, Doc Gelb, what made you start this movie? What made you start this documentary? I mean, you're sitting in your office, you're seeing patients. What were the steps to making a documentary? Thank you for doing that. It was a great movie. I really enjoyed it. And you know, our goal is accessibility of healthcare to all of our communities. And the one nice thing about being virtual and doing documentaries is that accessibility can be found across the globe. So give us the steps in case there's any future documentary audience amongst the Biohack crew.
Sure. I mean, I really wanted the population at large to know how incredible the eye is. I've been practicing for many years, and every day I'm still amazed at what I see in the eye. Before COVID and we were shut down, that week before that, I had 3 patients who had signs of high blood pressure in their eye. And if they didn't see me, they went to know, and I had no idea that their blood pressure was high. So I want the world to know what we could do from looking into the eye, that it's a lot more than just glasses and contact lenses. And as far as making the film, you know, we went to many different countries. We were in Costa Rica, we were in Canada, we were in Hungary, we were at Budapest. But my heart really is in Costa Rica with the centenarians, because those patients there, they have been sitting blind for 20 years, 30 years, but you know, they have trouble seeing, but they don't get the diseases of the West. So we wanted to see what their eyes were like. And lo and behold, even though they got cataracts, which is a normal disease of aging, they weren't getting macular degeneration. So as far as the next film that we're doing, we're looking to go back to Costa Rica to look at the centenarians, people that are over 100, to perform cataract surgery and to tell stories about what their life is like. So if there is anybody out there that would like to help us with our next project, we'd love to have you. Go to our website. You could go to my Dr. Kerry Gelb, OD, or you could go to Open Your Eyes 2020, and leave a message for myself or the director of the film, the amazing Wayne Chesler.
In Costa Rica, it's pura vida, right? So that's kind of...
It's amazing, you know, they live off the land. We would see people in the jungle, obviously, they have no processed foods, they have no stress. You know, they tell us to stay out of the sun in this country. They're out in the sun 10 hours a day. They get special water that's full of magnesium and calcium. They're exercising by working on their land. They're really amazing, and they're wonderful people.
And grounding on the beach every day, going into the ocean, the salt water. So there is something to be said about ancestral medicine and ancestral health when you look at these centenarians and what's at the forefront of their brain: happiness. You know, happiness before even health. So I've been out of Costa Rica and really appreciate the lifestyle there, and I can see why people live so long. And Dr. Cruz, the neurologist in your movie, I loved his one phrase, alien son. I've got a 2.5-year-old named Clara, and I've noted that she's kind of with COVID. Obviously, we're stuck at home and we don't have childcare, and my daughter's been put in front of the alien son a lot more than traditionally she has been. Maybe if I could pose this question to both of you guys. Obviously, the alien sun or blue light and our science and technology is not going to die away, right? We need science and technology. But how do we foster that relationship with ancestral health like the Pura Vida people do in Costa Rica? Do you guys have anything coming down the pipeline with any science and technology innovators in the light industry? We're not going to get away from the screens, but can we change our science and technology? Can we innovate it?
Yeah, it's a good point. I mean, I think we touched on some of the things we can do, but definitely there's a lot of light pollution for sure. And there's a group called Human-Centric Lighting, which is kind of really around this issue. And you can follow their work. They're really making a movement to try and redo all of our indoor spaces and office spaces to basically, you know, detox us from the harmful light that's all around us.
So I think that it's really important to get out in the morning when the sun is rising and be exposed to the sun. You know, even if it's 20 minutes, a half hour a day, because the problem with the light coming off the computers is it's blue light, but it's unopposed blue light. The light we get from the sun is a full spectrum. So we get UV, we get, depending on the latitude, the UV comes up, we get UV, we get infrared, which is 42% of the light coming from the sun. And the infrared sun is healing, plus the blue light. But when we're looking at the computer, we're always at 12 noon. So why, and it's unopposed. So when I'm driving, I always keep the sunroof down. I think it's very important to make sure that you get some real sun and balance it with the sun with the alien sun, as Dr. Jack Cruz says, coming off the computers.
And one of the most important things that I learned from the movie was you got to watch for eye health and brain health. You got to get up for sunrise every single day. So I've been following the lead. Hey, Doc Gelb, one more question for you. In the movie, you found some microaneurysms. Do you want to explain how you corrected those over a period of time? And it looked like you implemented some basic functional medicine and foundational health into your regimen. And I noted that you had an infrared sauna in your basement. You want to kind of just touch base on that, on how you turned your own kind of healthcare crisis into a victory?
You know, one of the things that I started, one of my main biohacks, and now is infrared sauna, and I stopped eating after, you know, many days I stopped eating after 4:30 in the afternoon, you know, and I never eat later than 7. And I think that was one of because I always ate pretty healthy. I just ate too much and I ate late. And I follow a paleo type diet, but the worst thing you can do is eat and then go to bed. And I think one of the misnomers that with intermittent fasting is not eating breakfast and not eating lunch and then eating dinner at 7, 8 o'clock. And I think that's totally wrong. I think you should eat a giant breakfast and a giant lunch late and then fast the rest of the night. And if you want to drop weight and you want to build muscle, if you're exercising, that is absolutely the best way. And that's really eating healthy food, because I really only eat food with one ingredient. I follow my own 10-point plan. I follow that to a T. that I have there. And I have one for also for dry eye and some different things. But I follow it very closely. I eat real food, no processed food, no chemicals, and I don't eat late anymore.
Yeah, thank you for that point. And there is some great research coming out with microbial health and our microbes following that circadian rhythm, and intermittent fasting or time-restricted eating, but eating earlier and pushing that dinner plate a little bit away earlier in the evening. Vishu?
So, Dr. K, I've got a two-part question for you. So you mentioned in your talk that lutein and zeaxanthin are super important for eye health. You both covered that. It was fantastic, and it got me curious. So first, you mentioned that these days, because we're exposed to so much blue light, it's almost impossible to actually get that from dietary sources, and we sort of need to add on a little bit. And then you also mentioned how the way it works is you've got these double carbon bonds that go and help to absorb that blue light. So step one, a little while ago, a friend of mine left for the weekend, and while she was gone, I snuck into her apartment and filled her refrigerator with 50 pounds of carrots. Now, little did I know, actually, that it turns out carrots were her favorite food. And over the course of the next 2 or 3 weeks, she ate all of them. Now, this was a surprise. But if by eating either that number of carrots or some of these other foods that you mentioned, do you think that it's at all possible to get enough of a biologic dose of these compounds to actually have a noticeable effect in our current lives? And then to add on to that, we know that blue light is important. Like, as you said, we evolved being very sensitive to it. It's part of our overall circadian rhythm in order to properly gauge a lot of our bodily rhythms. So if our eyes are absorbing it, is that light essentially getting blocked by the zeaxanthin and lutein, or is it going and sort of just defraying any of like the reactive oxygen species that are being produced by it? So as I stare at the screen, is it sort of breaking down these compounds in my eye, or is it just the fact that I have more of them that's helping me be exposed to these screens for a larger period of time without the negative side effects?
Yeah. Well, I'm impressed that you were able to find 50 pounds of carrots from the store and deliver them to your friend's house. But yeah, I mean, certainly it's just basically numbers. So yeah, if you ate enough of those foods, and you didn't throw it up afterwards, then yeah, you would get enough of a dose. But then you'd have to sustain that every day. That's the thing. It's like, it's not just a one-time dose, but it's a daily dose of about 20 milligrams. So that's the hard part with the nutrition. I mean, certainly I'm all for the green leafy vegetable diet. Everything Dr. Gelb talked about is spot on. But with these particular compounds, it seems that extra supplementation can help. And then for your second question, the answer is basically yes to all of the above. So the carbon-carbon double bonds are one part, but it's also just the fact that those nutrients get taken up in the retina, because there's plenty of compounds that have double bonds. But why are lutein and zeaxanthin special? It's because they reside within the retina, and that's just where the body places them. And so because they're absorbing them in that spot, it helps to filter out the blue light. And basically they're absorbing it. I don't think it's blocking it like the glasses are. I think that blue light is coming in and it's hitting those double bonds and it's being absorbed. And not only that, but definitely you mentioned the reactive oxygen species. These are antioxidants. So they're also preventing oxidative damage within the retina.
So if I take all these supplements and have a lot more of that in my eye and then cut out my screens, I don't have to worry about that in some way messing with my circadian rhythm because I'm blocking too much of the natural blue light.
That's the idea. That's the idea. It's the blue light story is a little bit too early for us to have long-term data, but that is the idea behind it. And the studies have really shown so far that it improves sleep, reduces digital eye strain, and you get all the benefits from it.
All right, great. I got to get me some of these supplements. And Dr. Gelb, so you've spoken a lot about all of this amazing new technology that we have to analyze the eyes and determine all sorts of other potential diseases or risk factors for diseases that are coming from it. So the first question definitely is, where do I get one? And the follow-up question to that is just, how do you see this type of imaging working into the typical flow of the general practice? So if I'm a person, I want to make sure that I'm healthy, normally I go in for my eye exam, is this something that a typical doctor will perform and know how to interpret? Or do I have to seek out some specialist to be able to run this for me and then maybe let me know that I'm pre-diabetic?
So this technology is expensive, so not every doctor has OCT angiography, or they have an imaging instrument that absorbs at the yellow, so we can see the microaneurysms better. So really, but most doctors have some type of imaging equipment, and so I think before you get your eyes examined, you just want to make sure that they have this. One of the problems is that, and one of the reasons why we did the film, is that most eye doctors test for this, but the public doesn't know that we test for it. It's a big secret. So I think as far as that question, and what was the other question you asked me?
The other question was, how do you see this going forward fitting into the normal process of a person's yearly medical exam? So I know that.
Yeah, so I think it's really important that this is part of a regular medical exam, because we could see the blood vessels in the eye. We could see microvasculature. So you go to a GP or an internist, they're seeing macrovascular, we're seeing microvascular, but it's never been kind of put together before. The dots were never connected, but because the technology is so good now, we're able to connect the dots and say, yes, you're insulin resistant, and we could prove it with a blood test. So that's what we did. We were able to prove it with blood tests. So but there's other reasons that people can get hemorrhages in the eye. It's not only because of insulin resistance or diabetes. We've had people with high Lp(a), and the reason why I really started doing blood tests in my office is because I would see a hemorrhage in somebody's eye and I would refer it to the local PCP, and they would always come back negative. Well, there's 1,000 biomarkers. So if you don't study functional medicine, you don't know the right biomarkers to do, it's going to come out negative. So, I've had patients with high homocysteine, and that's why they had retinal hemorrhages. So there's many different reasons. So you have to be a good clinician and a good inspector to find out the reason why somebody has what they do. And, I could tell you with Lp(a), I've seen 20-year-olds, 28-year-old and a 32-year-old who had branch vein occlusion, which is strokes in the eye from high Lp(a), which is unbelievable. And they would have said, well, we don't know why you're getting this. But because we did Lp(a) and because of functional medicine, we were able to find this and help these people.
That's amazing.
So is the real solution, Doc, and we had an offline conversation, if we can jump into this. So our audience kind of practices functional medicine. Typically in the functional medicine world, we believe in doing biochemistry testing, and we don't look at reference ranges, we look at optimal ranges, and we look at the correlation between certain biomarkers on CBCs with differentials. So at the end of the day, if the technology is there and the accessibility is there for this eye exam, in your subjective opinion, should we be getting a thorough CBC with differential and a diagnostic eye exam? And if so, with the diagnostic eye exam, when realistically will this be accessible to the general public?
So yes, I think an eye exam is essential, but what we find in the eye, again, we don't necessarily know what it is, so that's why we have to also do the blood test to say, okay, yeah, it's because you have the hemorrhage because your insulin is high, or your blood sugar is high, or your Lp(a) is high, or your platelets are off the chart.
So would you agree that this should be in the paradigm of functional medicine testing?
Absolutely.
Just like we're doing blood and stool and
100%.
Genomic testing, et cetera. Awesome. Thank you very much for that. And then to piggyback that, accessibility. So obviously, you're to your point that the technology isn't really there, the accessibility isn't really there. How can our audience, if they're interested in this eye exam, how can they tomorrow or next week get it done?
Well, right now they have to go to somebody who has OCT angiography in their office and ask for that test. And as the research has shown, that we could see patterns early for Parkinson's and Alzheimer's, and we can look at the web of the blood vessels. Right now, multispectral imaging isn't available yet. It's going to be reintroduced in the U.S. with a portable instrument within the next 6 months or so. It's when I understand it's been delayed a little bit because of COVID.
Got it. Was that the same instrument in the movie that the astronaut was diagnosing?
That's an OCT. That's a handheld OCT. That is available. But we don't use that instrument. That was made specifically for NASA.
Got it. Well, me and Avisha are going to hog up all your times. We can nerd out with you guys till probably 3 in the morning. So when the audience turns off, we'll keep talking. But we do have some questions from the audience. The first one that I think was answered in the chat, but just to make sure everybody saw it, from Physiologics Functional Medicine Department, Dr. Patty de Blasio asked, what is the relationship with bilberry and eye health? If you guys could both answer that, we would appreciate it.
You want to go first?
Sure. Yeah, I had answered in the chat that bilberry is one of the ingredients that have been shown in some studies to have an antioxidative effect in the retina and help with macular degeneration. There's sort of a myth / story that World War II fighter pilots used to eat bilberry before like a big mission at night because it would improve night vision. That hasn't really obviously borne out in studies, but it just kind of shows that bilberry, I think, is a good ingredient for the eye.
Yeah, I mean, there's not as much research on bilberry like there is in lutein, zeaxanthin, meso-zeaxanthin, vitamin D, omega-3s. We could hang our hat on those. There's a lot of research on that. Bilberry, the research is very soft.
Got it. Doc, your 10-point dietary recommendations, can you reverse or cure eye lesions? And then I got a second part question as it relates to regenerative medicine procedures, because obviously there's been some not so safe procedures that have blinded a couple patients. I don't know if you're familiar with, but if both of you could field that question from the audience, please.
So as far as reversing with my 10-point plan, the purpose of the 10-point plan is to prevent progression. The reversing is not something that I'm typically seeing with macular degeneration. As far as diabetes goes, yes, with diabetes you can get people to get better by changing with lifestyle and functional medicine techniques as far as health goes. That, I think we've all seen that.
Got it.
And what was the second question?
I'm sorry, before you get off that, diabetes, type 2 diabetes or 1 or 3 or all the above? Type 2. Okay.
When I'm talking about type 2 diabetes.
Got it. Dr. K, would you mind answering that question? And I'm going to circle back to both of you on regenerative medicine.
I said the same thing. Somebody asked about clearing drusen within the eye, and I basically said, I don't think you can clear it once it's there, but this is more like Dr. Gelb said about prevention.
Okay. Maybe if we can jump into the regenerative medicine field and how it relates to both of your specialties, Dr. K, obviously you as a surgeon. As I said before, there's been some not so safe, precarious procedures that have blinded a couple of patients in the regenerative medicine field and has kind of muddied the waters, if you will, when it relates to the FDA and Google advertising as it relates to AdWords and regenerative medicine clinics being able to advertise. What are your takes on regenerative medicine procedures to reverse any permanent damage?
Yeah, there's a lot to say about this. I mean, I do think that it's on the horizon, and this is where we have to go because there are so many diseases we just cannot fix. Once it's happened. At the same time, I think my best advice is you have to do it within a clinical trial that is basically sponsored by the study. So the problem with these clinics in Florida where people went blind is the patients actually paid for that treatment. So if you go to clinicaltrials.gov, that will be listed as a trial on there, and you might think, okay, this is approved, but it's actually not sort of like an approved trial. The study, people ran it. So it should be at a university, and you shouldn't be paying for it, basically is a good rule of thumb. Also, make sure you stay within the US. There's all sorts of clinics in China and even in Europe I had my patients go to and never seen anybody get better. But certainly there's a lot of research in terms of gene therapy is really hot in ophthalmology right now. stem cells. So I hope we'll get there soon.
Got it. And to piggyback that question, you being a surgeon and a proceduralist, what conditions are down the pipeline that could be beneficially helped with regenerative medicine procedures? And if you could just talk about the procedures themselves.
The big conditions are basically retinal and optic nerve degenerations and conditions, and there's thousands of them, either hereditary or acquired. And optic nerve problems are just something we don't have a treatment for, and I deal with that all day as a neuro-ophthalmologist. People come to me with a lot of hope, and we don't have good treatments. But things like macular degeneration, retinitis pigmentosa, optic nerve injuries, those are all ripe for regenerative medicine. In general, in terms of surgery, one rule of thumb is if a surgeon tells you there's no risk, run the other way. There's risk with any surgery. The second rule of thumb I give people is the best person to tell you who a good surgeon is like another doctor that works with them. You can't tell by Googling somebody or like their advertisement. Even if they're at Harvard, a lot of those times people at Harvard are like, just researchers or they're in academics. The people that know are really like the other doctors. So try and get an opinion from another physician.
All right, thank you. And I believe that was our last question. And now it's time for the possibly most exciting part of the evening, which is the trivia. And I believe we have a winner. David, that would be?
Yes, the winner is Andrew Appel.
Andrew Appel. All right, you have won a copy of Boundless and a wonderful functional medicine consult. And before we go and say what that answer was, we're just going to try and see if any of our wonderful presenters tonight could give us the answer, see what you guys think. So once again, the question was, when was the first lens created / the principles of the lens actually written down, discovered? The potential answers were A, 5th century in ancient Greece, 5th century BC, B, the 11th century in Egypt, C, the 13th century in Italy, or D, the 16th century in the Netherlands.
This is called putting our speakers on the spot moment. Welcome.
I'll go with Italy.
Italy, all right. 13th century Italy for Dr. Gelb. And Dr. K, do we have a guess from you?
Final answer.
I'll go with the opposite, Greece.
Greece, all right. So the actual answer was 11th century Egypt. Although it can get a bit confusing because in ancient Greece at that time, they did use certain spherical rocks that were see-through as magnifiers. In 13th century Italy, they developed the first eyeglasses, and in 16th century the Netherlands, they developed the microscope. But 11th century in Egypt, that was actually the first time someone laid down all the principles of physics of the lens in the year 1020 by a Dr. Ibn Haytham while he was in prison. He wrote a 7-volume treatise on it. It's pretty fascinating. So there we have it. Okay, and with that, I believe we're going to go to...
Yeah. Doc Gelb, Doc K, thank you so much. If you guys can stick around, we're going to cut that. We're going to splice those answers off, and then post-production, we're going to re-record with the right answers. But just want to say thank you guys so much. Wonderful presentation. Just want to remind our audience to watch Dr. Gelb's documentary at biohackthe.world, biohackthe.world, and password Biohack, and it will be available until Sunday evening. So guys, thank you so much. Really appreciate it. Appreciate the tips. And if you guys want to tell us how our audience can follow you, Dr. Gelb?
So you could go to openyoureyes2020.com or Dr. Kerry Gelb, OD, and watch my podcast, Dr. Kerry Gelb or Open Your Eyes. You can see it on many different channels, many different streams. It's on all of them, but certainly on YouTube is the most popular one.
Awesome. Thanks, Doc. Dr. K, if you can plug your nutraceutical nootropic company too, please. I said I wouldn't put you on the spot, but please do.
Sure, yeah. When I did all this research, I founded a company called Itamins, itamins.co, and we're really trying to make this more, educate the public and make these supplements more mainstream, because I think we can really help a lot of people with their eye health. So itamins.co.
Awesome. Thanks, guys. Really appreciate you.
Thank you so much.
And thank you, audience, for showing up today. I just want to make a couple announcements. Most likely in the world that we live in today, we're going to do another virtual show versus a live show, but that next show is Thursday, July 16th at 7 p.m. EST with the health optimization medicine specialist, Dr. Scott Shear, functional medicine physician, hyperbaric oxygen therapist, and Dr. Ted Ochakoso, that's one of his partners. So we're really looking forward to that show. Same format, same time. Hopefully you guys can show up. If you liked anything that you saw this evening, please tell a friend. We're trying to build our audience, and we're trying to give you guys free information to change the healthcare crisis that we're in today. Please follow us on Facebook. We're on Instagram. Be safe, be healthy, be happy. See you soon.